Okay, this is note 7-4. Okay, solving quadratic inequalities. First off, I'm going to start you off with a little bit of a cheat sheet up at the top. I want you to write these, and you can use them on your quizzes and tests as kind of a little help for reading the signs. This sign here, I'm reading it from left to right, is less than. This one would be greater than. And this would be less than or equal to. And this would be less than or equal to. I'm sorry. Let me switch that. I did that one. This one is greater than or equal to. Okay, with our less thans, they'll have open circles and our greater thans because they are not inclusive. That means they don't include the point. With our less than and equal to or greater than equal to, it'll be a colored in circle when we go and we plot it or graph it because it includes that point. Okay, moving on. First thing we want to do is put our x squared minus x minus 6 into our calculator into the y equals and graph it. Okay, once I graph it, I want any of the points that are, this says less than 0. Okay, so whenever we're talking less than 0, then that means below the x-axis. So we want stuff that is down here, any of the graph that's down here. We don't care about any of the graph that's up here. All right, so let me get those back off there. So when I graph it, it's going to give me a parabola, and it's going to cross the x-axis. So once it crosses the x-axis, I have to go in and find my zeros. And when I do that, I find that one of those zeros is -2, and the other 0 is 3. Again, it says less than, so it's an open circle at those guys. And all we care about is the part that's below the graph, so a little rough sketch would be that. Okay, so in order to find those zeros, remember we went second trace, and it said left bound, and we had to click on left. So we did second trace zeros. Left bound, we had to put it on the left side of one of our zeros, hit enter. And then it says right bound, we put on the right side of one of our zeros, hit enter. It says guess, we hit enter, and then it gives me my 0. Then I move on to the other side and do the other one the exact same way. Now when I go and put them on my sign graph over here, I'm going to put them on just like they look. -2 and 3. Both of those are open circles. And everything in between, because it's a loop, okay, our graph, that means that anything in between -2 and 3 would hit that graph. So if I said your x value was 1, you would actually have to go down to hit the graph, which is what we want. We want less than 0. So anytime I shade in between, I have to put my x in between these two guys. And as I read this, it says x is got to be greater than -2, but less than 3. Okay. Moving on, number 2, I see that it's exact same graph. It's just now asking for greater than. So it wants above the x-axis. So on this one, I already know that it's going to cross at -2, and it's an open circle. And it's going to cross at 3, and it's an open circle. And it was it was graphed like this. Now remember, this is the top part of the graph you just graphed in number 1. Okay, we don't care about the bottom underneath the x where it loops back around. We only care about what is greater than 0. So in this case, I would put -2 with an open circle. And I would put 3 with an open circle, and they're shaded out. Now, when I shade out, I notice I got two separate graphs. One of them would be x is less than negative 2, or the other one is x is greater than 3. Okay, number 3. I'm going to graph that guy. It's already in ABC form, so I graph it. Put it in my calculator, and it wants to know when it is greater than or equal to 0. So on or above the x-axis. So once I get that in, I can find my zeros. And once I find my zeros, I find that it's crossing the x-axis at negative 3. And because it's equal to, it's a closed-in circle. And it's crossing at 0.5. And again, all we care about is above because greater than. So that part of the graph. So I transfer negative 3, closed circle, 0.5, closed circle. And of course, it's another loop, so it's shaded. Everything in between is good. Everything in between those 2 points would be above the or on the x-axis. So I put my answer in between and 0.5. X has to be greater than or equal to negative 3. And it has to be less than or equal to 0.5. Number 4, I have to put in ABC order. I have to move the negative 1 across and rewrite it as 3x squared minus 6x plus 1 is less than or equal to 0. So I want to know when it is on or below the line. When I graph that, I see a little bitty graph there that's going to be below, and I find the zeros on it as well. And I see that one of them, if that was 1, it would be right about here. It's 0.18. We're rounding to 2 decimal places. So I put 0.18. Closed in circle because it's equal to. My other 0, once I find it, it's 1.82, so almost a 2. 1.82. I put it on. And since I care about what is below, that means it's the loop. So that means it's in between. That's a closed in circle. So I put my answer in between. X has to be greater than or equal to 0.18, but less than or equal to 1.82. Finally, I put in the next one, and I see something different. I see a graph that does this. It touches and goes up. We know that graph goes on and on forever. Okay, in that situation, it's asking me when is the graph greater than or equal to 0? Well, it is touching the x-axis, right and around here somewhere, and it is above it the entire time. So that means that any answers for x would fit, because anything I choose, whether I choose negative 10 or I choose positive 10, I would have to go up to hit the graph. So it would be always greater than or equal to 0. So all we did was we just kind of accentuated this line a little bit, and we put negative infinity, because it goes on forever, to positive infinity. So any numbers left and right would work. And then we put that in as negative infinity to positive infinity. Or you could write the symbol all real numbers. The work we did for this was A7-4. And we did numbers 2, 4, and 5. And that concludes the notes for 7-4.